Hello everyone, Ketchi1383 with Ketchi Gaming. So I was playing a game that I wanted to review, or just maybe make a commentary about it, which was Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks, and maybe even the Phantom Hourglass. And I'm playing it via the Wii U, which you can probably see via my streams that no one watches, but that's fine. I just thought it would be nice to just sort of stream it while I play through it and capture footage and all the other fun stuff. But unfortunately, due to a conflict between two of my cats and me leaving it on my desk, the Wii U gamepad had an unfortunate accident, and I have a replacement screen coming in, and I'll have to hopefully figure that out. Otherwise, that's going to hit a very sudden stop in production. In the meantime, I was looking for things just to do videos on. I mean, there's plenty of things. It's just sort of like actually finding something that I think is worth covering. I mean, people have done mainstream Zelda to death, and that's why I wanted to do Spirit Tracks, because I never played it before. I mean, in most cases right now, that just means starting a whole entire another game, which, I've come to the conclusion that I'm going to have to until the screen arrives, and then I had to put the whole thing in together, and it's a whole entire mess. But something did drop in my lap that I kind of wanted to go over, and I shouldn't really say it dropped in my lap, but last year, when Mario and Luigi Brothership came out, I did not like it. I thought it was way too long with an absolutely abysmal pace. I thought the combat was okay at first, but then it sort of just dragged on later on. And some of the bro moves were a little too fast-paced and cumbersome for my particular likings of how that works. On top of that, I wasn't a fan of Luigi being more or less controlled by AI an overwhelming majority of the time. Even though I've only played 2 of the Mario and Luigi games, it didn't feel like one. But then something happened in December that I was totally unaware of, but I saw that they had a Ask and Develop Volume 15 Mario and Luigi Brothership, and I read through it. And some light came through about some of the issues with the game. Part 1 is the people doing the interview introducing themselves, as well as a brief history of how they were approached by Nintendo to make Mario and Luigi Brothership. Long story short, they have a history of working on 2D RPGs, particularly Octopath Traveler, if that rings a bell for anybody. On top of that, a lot of people from Alpha Dream moved over to Acquire at one point, so Nintendo approached them to make Mario and Luigi Brothership. So one of the things they talked about was getting an art style down, as well as moving Mario and Luigi over from the 2D pixel art to a 3D universe. And they had some struggles with that, and they came up with their own concept art for what they wanted to do. A more ragged, kind of dirty-looking Mario. But Nintendo told them to move in a direction that's more in line with the basic Mario games that you see today in terms of their appearance. And here's some concept art. I mean, it's only just 2 pictures that they showed during this whole entire interview. There's probably a lot more. And that concept art is just a Mario and Luigi. There's also concept art for Connie and maybe a couple of other characters on the website if you want to go take a look at it. So basically, the long short of it is that they arrived at the art style that they used. And an unfortunate part of that art style is that big, thick black lines you see around everything, giving it a cartoon appearance. Apparently, having that around everything was such a major draw for the CPU that it caused frame rate drops, or the game actually played at a really low frame rate, but it also caused frame rate drops every now and again. I really didn't notice, mainly because I was probably just bored out of my mind with this game. I like the art style, but I'm not a fan of the low frame rates. I prefer to have higher frame rates, particularly when it comes to an RPG where you have to react to things. Yes, I noticed that the frame rate was low, but I didn't really notice any drops in it. Then again, also, when I'm editing a lot of this, it alters the frame rate, so I probably just don't notice when I'm looking at it through a second viewing of it. So they are definitely conscious of the black lines being very CPU intensive and causing the slow frame rate along with some of the drops. But throughout the whole entire interview, even on the other pages, you can tell that they were focused very much on making it a Mario and Luigi feel for the whole entire game. They think they accomplished that. Personally, I would have to disagree. Well, let me rephrase that. Let's go with it depends, given the lawyer answer. Some parts, yes. Some parts, no. So, Acquire mainly focused on the visuals and the gameplay elements. That's where we got the whole entire thing where Luigi basically is just an AI. That's the part I more or less disagree with the most there. But an interesting part is they went to an outside company, they didn't say who, to write the story. Which feels like a bit of a mistake considering how much of a slog it was to get through all of that. And like I said before, or I should say in my review, the IGN editor who rated this game said he did it in like 40 hours. It took me 70 to do all the fun side stuff. And when I say fun, I'm being cynical, and it was boring as hell. But it took me around 70 to get all of that done. So I don't know how much he went through. I mean, there's some interesting parts about this when they're talking about the animation, like when they get shot out of the cannon and they approach each island and they give its own unique animation every time. Particularly when Luigi lands and they basically have a progression of him messing up the landing to nailing it at the end, even if it's accidental. On top of that, you get to see some of the thought processes of how they came up with some of their ideas, like connecting the islands. Originally, they thought of a rope. I don't think it was actually a literal rope. They were thinking of a connection, and then they wound up with a plug with a connection of light is how they eventually came up with it. It was a rainbow at first, and eventually coming up with the concept of using a plug. And that's mainly tied into the story where, like I said in my review, because it's very heavy-handed, they were talking about connections between people in your lives. Family, friends, enemies, a whole bunch of other themes that they put in the game. They even touched on the comparison between the Mario movie and this game, particularly when they're going down that tunnel of light and they're grasp each other and then they get separated. It's very similar, but apparently they didn't know that was a thing when they made the cutscene. So it's just a coincidence that happened. And while we're talking about the animation, they did also address the battle between Zocket and Bowser, which is one of my favorite cutscenes throughout the whole entire game. They wanted to make a scene that was full of tension and had some impact, and yeah, they did. I actually liked the fight between the two, and I kind of wish it lasted a little bit longer. But then again, at that point, I was just bored out of my mind with the game, so who knows. So it was an interesting read, actually, sort of seeing the thought process behind it. I'm going to have to disagree on some of the things, particularly in regards to Luigi and capturing the Mario and Luigi game. If you like it, that's fine. I was just bored out of my mind with the game by the time I was done with it. Now, in terms of sales, now that some time has passed, so far it's sold just over 1.8 million copies, which places it in third in comparison to Paper Mario, the Thousand Door remake, and then the Mario RPG remake. It actually didn't sell nearly as well as that. I think that's around 5 million copies. I don't know what that looks like financially. I'd have to know what the budget is to determine if that 1.8 million is actually kind of decent and how much revenue and stuff like that they generated from that sale of the 1.8 million copies. It doesn't sound impressive, but if the budget was relatively small, I think it might be, but I don't really know. I do hope they get to make the Mario and Luigi game they want to make instead of having direction from Nintendo, because they set them on the path to more or less be similar to the previous Mario and Luigi games, which is a bit of a problem because that kind of got a little bit on the stale side, which is kind of why the series went downhill and the company had to close their doors. And I'd rather not see another company go down with the ship. And I don't really think the dictatorial edicts from Nintendo to stick with the formula is going to help them, and hopefully they won't. I don't know at this point. Nintendo's being a little bit unpredictable in terms of what they do and won't do. Anyways, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Have a good one.